It was supposed to be a quiet morning at the Jefferson County Courthouse, gray skies, soft rain, the kind that made the marble steps glisten like they'd been polished overnight. But before noon, those same steps would be smeared with blood. Jonas Reed didn't plan to make the news that day. He only came to deliver the truth. At 59, he still carried himself like the firefighter he'd been for 3 decades, straight-backed, broad-shouldered, calm under pressure. But his hands, once steady from years of pulling people out of flames, trembled slightly as he clutched the sealed envelope against his chest. Inside was footage, proof that could clear a young protester named Malik Jones of a crime he didn't commit. Malik had been accused of assaulting an officer during a protest downtown 2 weeks earlier. The story spread fast, another violent agitator, another young black man blamed for chaos. Jonas had been there that night, off-duty, watching from across the street when the scuffle broke out. He'd seen the truth. The boy never touched the cop. He'd tried sending the footage through official channels. No one cared. The courthouse kept losing his calls. So he came in person. As Jonas approached the metal detector, the deputy posted there gave him a long, sizing look. Officer Dale Riker, mid-30s, compact frame, clean uniform that fit too tight around the ego. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing at Jonas's worn jacket and the envelope in his hand. "Can I help you with something, sir?" Jonas nodded politely. "I'm here to see the clerk. I have evidence for the Malik Jones case." Riker's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Evidence, huh? You an attorney?" "No. Just a witness." That was all it took. The air shifted. Riker rose from his seat, towering in the small space between the metal rails. "You can't just walk in here with documents, old man. You'll need to submit that through proper channels." "I already did," Jonas said evenly. 3 times. Nobody called back. Riker's jaw tightened. Then maybe they didn't think it was worth calling back. Jonas stared at him, not angry, just tired. The truth's always worth something. The people behind him in line began to murmur. A woman fidgeted with her purse. A man whispered, "Just let him through, man." But Riker wasn't having it. "You can step aside, or I'll escort you out myself." Jonas didn't move. "I'm not leaving until someone takes this evidence." Riker stepped closer. "Don't test me." Jonas held out the envelope like an offering. "Then do your job and deliver it." That was it. The flashpoint. Riker reached for the envelope, but Jonas instinctively pulled it back, not out of defiance, but to keep it safe. The motion was small, barely noticeable. But Riker reacted like he'd been challenged. His hand went to Jonas's shoulder, shoved once, then harder. Jonas stumbled but didn't fall. "Sir, calm down." Riker barked, the kind of command meant to flip blame before the cameras start rolling. And then someone's phone was out. Then another. Riker pushed him again, harder this time, until Jonas's back hit the marble post by the security gate. The envelope slipped from his hand, scattering papers across the floor. Jonas bent to retrieve them, and that's when Riker grabbed him. The sound was sharp, body hitting tile, elbow scraping marble. Gasps echoed. A law student sitting nearby stood up, phone shaking as she filmed. Jonas lay there for a second, staring up at the ceiling. The white light buzzed faintly. He could taste blood. But the strange thing was, he wasn't angry. Just profoundly sad. When Riker barked again for him to stay down, Jonas did the opposite. He pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet, slow and deliberate. He looked straight at Riker, not with fury, but with something heavier. Disappointment. "I told you," Jonas said quietly. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to tell the truth." The courthouse doors opened at that moment. Judge Harold Keene stepped into the hall, surrounded by aides. He froze when he saw the scene, an older black man bleeding from the temple, papers scattered across the floor, a deputy still holding his baton like the fight wasn't over. "Judge," Jonas said, voice steady, "the evidence is yours." For a long moment, no one moved. Riker's chest heaved. The judge's aides whispered. Phones were still recording. The sound of rain outside mixed with the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Then Jonas wiped the blood from his temple and stooped to gather the papers. His hands shook, but he refused to let anyone help. Riker muttered something under his breath, "Should have stayed home." Jonas turned his head just slightly. The words barely escaped his lips. "Home's where I learned to stand." He walked past the deputy, straight to the clerk's desk, and set the blood-stained envelope down. The room was silent except for the faint squeak of his wet shoes on marble. The clerk, a young woman with trembling hands, reached out and took the envelope. Jonas nodded once. Behind him, a security guard whispered, "Sir, you might need medical." Jonas raised a hand, cutting him off. "I'm not the one on trial." The words hung there, cold and clear, like a verdict no judge could overturn. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, everyone stood still, unsure whether they just witnessed a crime or something closer to history. The courthouse looked different now. Yesterday, it was just another government building, polished marble floors, the smell of paper and bleach. Today, it pulsed with noise, 100 cameras clicking like teeth. The video of Jonas Reed being thrown to the floor had spread overnight. It was on every phone, every feed, every screen. And now, every seat in courtroom 2B was filled. Veterans in uniform. Firefighters in their old department jackets. Reporters elbowing for position. The air felt electric, like something was about to break. Jonas sat quietly in the witness chair, his temples still bandaged. The lights from the cameras hit the bruises on his face like accusations. But his posture never wavered. He didn't look angry. He looked resolved, like a man who had already made peace with the cost. Across the aisle sat Officer Dale Riker, the man who'd slammed him to the floor. His uniform was gone, replaced by a dark suit that did little to soften his expression. His lawyer whispered to him, but Riker's eyes stayed fixed on the desk, as if looking up might burn him. Judge Harold Keene entered, robe swaying, his face as unreadable as marble. He had seen protests before. Seen outrage come and go. But this felt different. It was as if the whole country was waiting for what happened next. "Court is now in session," he said. The prosecutor began, her tone clinical. "Your Honor, today's proceedings concern an altercation between retired firefighter Jonas Reed and Officer Dale Riker, which occurred yesterday morning inside this very building. We will determine whether excessive force was used, and whether Mr. Reed's actions constituted interference with court protocol." The word stung. Even now, they were trying to twist it. Jonas said nothing. He'd learned long ago that truth didn't need a salesman. "Mr. Reed," the judge said, "please take the stand." Jonas rose slowly. The crowd hushed. Cameras turned. The sound of his shoes against the floor echoed like drumbeats. He swore the oath, sat down, and folded his hands. "Mr. Reed," the prosecutor began, "why were you in the courthouse yesterday?" "I came to deliver evidence," he said. "Proof that Malik Jones, the young man accused of assaulting an officer, wasn't at the scene." "Did you attempt to bypass security?" "I followed every instruction given to me," he replied. "Until Officer Riker stopped me." "What happened next?" Jonas looked straight ahead. "He asked why I was here. I told him. He told me to leave. I said I couldn't. The evidence needed to reach the court. Then he pushed me." "Pushed you?" "Twice," Jonas said. "The second time, I hit the floor." The prosecutor shifted. "Did you resist?" "I stayed on the ground until he told me to leave again," Jonas said quietly. "Then I stood up." He paused. "And I told him, I'm not the one on trial." The line rippled through the courtroom again. Everyone had heard it before, from the viral clip. But hearing it live, in that hushed room, made it feel heavier. The prosecutor pressed on, but it was clear her rhythm was gone. The defense called for the footage. When the video played on the large screen, silence filled the space. The clip was short, only 30 seconds, but it was enough. The image of a retired black firefighter thrown to the floor by a younger white officer was more than a story. It was a mirror. You could feel the crowd's breath catch when Jonas got up in the video, blood running down his face, eyes burning but steady. When the lights came back on, the judge didn't speak immediately. He just stared at the table before him, as if something inside him had shifted. The prosecutor cleared her throat. The defense would like to call its next witness, Leah Stone. A young woman stood from the back, clutching her phone like a relic. Leah was the law student who'd filmed everything. Her hands trembled as she approached the stand, her curls falling over her face. "Miss Stone," the prosecutor said, "you recorded this footage?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Leah hesitated. "Because no one else was." A murmur ran through the room. "Did you edit or alter the footage?" "No. I just hit record." "And what did you see before you started filming?" Leah looked at Riker. Then at Jonas. "I saw a man trying to hand over an envelope. And another man deciding he didn't deserve to." The words hung there, sharp and quiet. Riker's lawyer stood. "Objection, that's speculation." "Sustained," said Judge Keene. But even he didn't sound convinced. The questioning continued for another 10 minutes, but the courtroom's focus had already shifted. No one was watching the lawyers anymore. They were watching Jonas. Watching the stillness in his face. Watching how he never once looked away from the man who'd hurt him. When his cross-examination ended, Jonas stepped down from the stand. The crowd parted for him as if gravity itself made space. As he sat back down, the judge spoke softly, almost to himself. "Mr. Reed, I've seen your record. 25 years in service, multiple commendations. You've saved lives. Do you understand that your actions yesterday could be seen as obstruction?" Jonas looked up. If carrying truth is obstruction, then maybe the system needs unblocking. It wasn't defiance in his tone, it was calm, unshakable logic. The kind that doesn't argue, it simply stands. Judge Keene leaned back, silent. For the first time in years, the bench felt smaller than the man before it. The judge cleared his throat. This court will take a short recess. The gavel struck. But Keene didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the floor, his thoughts miles away. The courtroom buzzed as people stood. Reporters whispered. Cameras blinked red. Outside, chants were already rising. Stand with Reed. Justice for Malik. Jonas didn't look at the crowd or the cameras. He looked at Riker. The officer's hands fidgeted, his jaw clenched. He seemed smaller now, not because of guilt alone, but because of recognition, that he'd been seen. As the bailiff motioned for everyone to leave, Jonas stood and turned toward the exit. The sunlight spilling through the tall courthouse windows caught the edge of his gray hair and the faint bandage on his temple. The world outside was waiting, but inside that courtroom, something had shifted. Judge Keene hadn't risen. He stayed seated, staring at the spot where Jonas had stood. For the first time in his long career, he wasn't sure if justice was something he'd been serving, or avoiding. And somewhere deep in that silence, the real reckoning had already begun. By morning, Jonas Reed's face was everywhere. It was on news banners, protest signs, and flickering phone screens. The clip of him standing bloodied but unbroken inside that courthouse had become the pulse of a nation. His silence, his steadiness, it said everything words never could. In the footage, he never raised his hands, never shouted. He simply stood up. And that image was now impossible to unsee. Outside City Hall, a crowd had gathered overnight. Veterans in old fatigues. Firefighters from different states. Students holding handwritten signs. The badge forgot its purpose. He didn't bow. Justice listens. They weren't angry, not yet. They were waiting. Waiting for someone, somewhere, to finally say what everyone already knew. Inside his small house on the east side of town, Jonas sat at his kitchen table, a cup of coffee cooling beside him. His phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, activists, networks, everyone wanted a statement. He hadn't answered a single call. When his neighbor, an old friend from the firehouse, stopped by, Jonas simply said, "The truth doesn't need a microphone." Outside, chants rolled down the street like distant thunder. That afternoon, the city released a statement, polished, legal, evasive. An internal investigation is underway, it said. Officer Dale Riker remains on administrative leave pending review. No apology. No accountability. Just the same cold language Jonas had heard his entire life. But this time, the city wasn't in control of the narrative. Leah Stone's video had taken on a life of its own. She hadn't posted it for fame, she'd uploaded it out of disbelief. But within hours, it had been shared by veterans groups, firefighter unions, and civil rights organizations. It was no longer a clip. It was evidence. Leah watched the chaos unfold from her apartment, her laptop glowing in the dark. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Reporters were calling her too now, wanting interviews, statements, angles. But all she could think about was that moment, Jonas standing, blood trickling down his temple, eyes steady. That night, she posted again. Just a still frame of him standing tall. The caption read, "He didn't raise his voice. He didn't bow." It went viral within the hour. Across the country, quiet acts began. Firefighters draped black ribbons over their station flags. Police officers, a few brave ones, knelt outside precincts. Church bells rang at noon. No one organized it. No one claimed it. But everyone understood what it meant. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, the hearings resumed. The air was heavier this time, reporters lined the walls, the judge's expression unreadable. The whispers stopped when Jonas entered the room. He didn't wear a suit or try to look polished. Just the same dark jacket he'd worn that day. A statement of its own. Officer Dale Riker sat a few feet away, looking smaller than before. The once stoic jaw was tight now, his eyes sunken. His lawyer whispered constantly, but Riker barely listened. When the judge called the court to order, the cameras blinked red again. Jonas wasn't testifying today, not yet. But the tension was visible, thick enough to taste. Riker's department was already unraveling. Old complaints resurfaced. 2 internal affairs officers were suspended for covering up prior brutality cases. The police chief was under review. It wasn't just about one man anymore. It was about everything that allowed that man to act with impunity. And still, Jonas refused every media request. When a reporter caught him outside the courthouse and asked, "Do you have anything to say to Officer Riker?" he simply replied, "Not yet." That "yet" lingered. When the defense called Riker to the stand, the courtroom seemed to shrink. He took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly as he was sworn in. Officer Riker, the prosecutor began, in your own words, describe what happened that morning. Riker swallowed hard. He wouldn't follow instructions. He stopped mid-sentence, glancing at Jonas. He was being stubborn. Stubborn, the prosecutor repeated. Riker nodded faintly. Yes, sir. He wouldn't move when I told him to. The prosecutor leaned forward. Was he violent? Riker hesitated. No. Did he raise his voice? No. So why did you throw him to the ground? Riker's throat bobbed. For the first time, he looked truly lost. Because he exhaled. Because I didn't see a man that day. The courtroom froze. Riker looked down, his voice trembling. I saw what I was taught to fear. Silence. No one moved. No one coughed. Even the judge's pen stopped scratching notes. For a long time, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then Judge Harold Keene leaned forward. His voice was calm, but each word landed with weight. Officer Riker, do you understand what you've just admitted? Riker nodded slowly. Yes, Your Honor. The judge looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, justice doesn't wear a badge. It listens. It was the first time in his long career that Keene's voice carried something like conviction. Jonas didn't smile. Didn't nod. He just sat there, absorbing it all. For years, he'd seen systems protect themselves, circle the wagons and bury the truth. But now, even if nothing changed on paper, something had cracked open. When the recess was called, people stayed seated. Cameras didn't flash. Reporters didn't move. Officer Riker stood slowly, looked across the courtroom, and met Jonas's gaze. His lips parted, his shoulders shaking slightly. I'm sorry, he said. No microphone. No drama. Just words that carried the weight of a lifetime of silence. Jonas didn't speak. He simply nodded once. And for a brief, fleeting moment, before the noise returned, before headlines spun and pundits debated, there was stillness. In that stillness, two men stood on opposite sides of history. One learning to see. The other proving he never had to bow to be heard. The courthouse steps had seen decades of verdicts, marches, and moments the city tried to forget. But that morning, they felt different, alive, humming, waiting. A crowd stretched across the plaza, veterans in faded uniforms, firefighters with their helmets tucked under their arms, teachers holding cardboard signs that simply read *dignity. No one shouted. No one sang. The air carried the quiet weight of respect. Inside, the gavel had fallen for the last time. Officer Dale Riker was found guilty of assault and misconduct. The decision drew no cheers, just the long exhale of a nation tired of holding its breath. When the doors finally opened, cameras flashed. But the man they'd all come to see didn't stride out like a hero. Jonas Reed walked slowly, shoulders back, face calm. His steps echoed faintly against the marble, every sound amplified by silence. The world watched as he emerged into the daylight, not victorious, but unbroken. There were no reporters shouting questions. No chants. Only the gentle flutter of flags and the faint murmur of wind. It was as if everyone had silently agreed that noise would cheapen the moment. Leah Stone, the young law student who'd filmed everything, stood at the base of the steps, clutching her phone. When Jonas reached her, she hesitated before asking, almost in a whisper, "Do you think justice was served?" Jonas looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "Justice isn't a verdict. It's how we remember." The words hung in the air like scripture. Leah lowered her phone. She didn't record that part. Later that evening, she posted a single video to her small social media account, no voiceover, no hashtags. Just a clip of Jonas descending those courthouse steps, his face lined with fatigue and grace. The crowd didn't cheer. They simply watched. Within hours, the video spread like a whisper that refused to die. It crossed cities, borders, oceans. By dawn, it had been viewed 20 million times. The internet called it, "the walk that changed everything." Someone captioned it with 3 words that caught fire, #he didn't bow. Across the country, screens flickered with the image, Jonas walking, head held high. At a high school in Detroit, teachers paused morning announcements to play the clip. In Chicago, a group of firefighters raised a banner on their station door that read, "We stand with Reed." Even in small towns where protests were once met with fear, something shifted. Police officers watched the video during roll call. Some looked down. Others nodded quietly. Leah sat in her dorm room, scrolling through messages she couldn't keep up with, journalists, activists, students, even officers who'd seen the footage and felt something they couldn't explain. Meanwhile, in the quiet edges of the city, the courthouse maintenance staff worked through the night. By morning, a small bronze plaque appeared beside the entrance. It read, "For those who stood when silence was safer." No one claimed credit for placing it there. No one removed it. Jonas didn't go online. He didn't read the comments or the think pieces. He spent his days sitting on the porch of his small home on Willow Street, drinking coffee from an old Firefighter mug. Reporters tried to reach him, but he politely declined every request. To him, the story was over. The rest was noise. One evening, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in slow-burning orange. A local news segment played on the small TV inside his living room. It showed groups of firefighters across the state holding moments of silence. One station even named a new scholarship for minority recruits after him, the Reed Courage Fund. Jonas smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I never asked for any of this," he murmured. From the corner of the room, a framed photograph caught the light, him in uniform, standing beside his old crew, all laughter and soot. He whispered, "Maybe we're finally learning." Days passed. Then weeks. But the world didn't move on. The movement born from his quiet defiance grew without leaders, slogans, or speeches. It spread in gestures, people standing up in meetings when something felt wrong, students defending classmates from bullying, officers calling out misconduct in their ranks. The silence Jonas carried that day in the courthouse, the stillness that made authority tremble, had become contagious. Leah visited him one last time before leaving for law school graduation. She brought a small gift, a printed still from the video, Jonas on the courthouse steps, head raised. Across the bottom, she'd written his words in neat handwriting, "Justice isn't a verdict. It's how we remember." Jonas looked at it for a long moment before saying, "You caught something in that video no one else did." "What's that?" she asked. He smiled. "That I wasn't standing against them. I was standing for what they forgot." Leah nodded, tears quietly forming. When she left, Jonas stayed on the porch, the sound of cicadas rising in the distance. The world was still divided, still messy, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something close to peace. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. Maybe another fight, maybe more silence. But that didn't matter. He'd already done what he came to do, not to shout louder, not to break the system, but to remind it what humanity looked like when it refused to kneel to fear. Months later, a new courthouse documentary opened with a single, haunting image, Jonas Reed walking through the doors on that fateful day, then out again, battered but upright. The narrator said only one line. He never wanted to start a movement, only to remind a country what standing looks like. And in that final frame, Jonas Reed's silhouette against the rising sun, the silence spoke again. It spoke of endurance, of dignity, of a man who didn't need to win to be remembered. Because in a world that keeps bowing to comfort, sometimes the loudest sound is made by the one who refuses to bow at all.